This video is meant to be a deeper explanation of polytheism versus monotheism. So a TikTok user with the profile Lux Tenebris 3, which actually means light darkness in Latin. You sing enough sacred songs in Latin, you begin to pick up on some stuff. Anyway, he made a very great video actually explaining my previous video about my problems with polytheism using set theory. So, if you have more of a mathematical understanding or lens of looking through life, that's going to be a video that's going to help you understand what I was talking about way better. It was really well done. So I just wanted to say that first. However, near the 5.5 minute mark is where he starts to veer off from what I was saying. And I don't completely fault him for it, because I'm sure I could have been 1,000 times more clear in my explanation. So this video is more so to clear up some stuff that I said and to do an even deeper dive into my thought process. So around that time in the middle of his video, I should explain something first, because I said something along the lines of, this god is worthy of worship and these gods are not worthy of worship, and that's because of the atrocities and etc. And some people had a problem with that, and you know what? I agree. I don't think that was the right way to start off that point. I'm going to get to that point eventually in this video, but to say that at the onset makes no sense unless I lead up to it. So let me start there. So what do I mean that something is worthy of worship? What is worship, first of all? It's giving God or the gods their due, what they're owed, in a sense, justice even. Usually this is the mindset of like thanksgiving, gratitude because of something they have done for us, which Lux Tenebris 3 mentions about the polytheistic Greek mythology religion, of how worship is in thanks of reception of things that the gods have done for the people. He also claims that that's not what the Christian God is, which, this video isn't about the Christian God, but we will get to that at some point. Essentially, worship falls under the premise that our ultimate commitment then is to appropriately relate to this god or gods, in this case in polytheism, which we would call cultivating a personal relationship. It's showing the proper relationship between humans and the gods, essentially. But the reason why this becomes an ultimate commitment for us, and not just something that is optional, is because the ultimate commitment refers to the harmonic way that we are going to live in this universe, in what reality is. And so to figure out what ultimate reality is in regard to polytheism, we need to ask a couple questions. Because in a monotheistic sense, ultimate reality is really easy to pinpoint. The god that is worshipped is ultimate reality. But in polytheism, there are either multiple gods or there are no gods, I should add. So what then becomes ultimate reality? Here are some of the questions we need to ask. What is the material world like? Are humans created or eternal? Are human beings composite or simple? What is the greatest good for human beings? And after answering these, we can ask, what is ultimate reality? So first, what is the material world like? Jainism would suggest that the universe is composed out of eternally existing atoms. Buddhism would say the material world is always in transition and nothing truly persists throughout time. Hinduism would say that there is no material world, that it's an illusion. As Lux Tenebris 3 points out, he discusses how in Greek Mythology, chaos is the first ultimate being, a nothingness, and that out of the void of chaos came Gaia, the earth, and Eros, love, etc. I'll explain why this is extremely problematic later in the video. First, Jainism would suggest that not only atoms were eternally existing, but humans are also eternal beings in an eternal cycle of karma, and because of this, they are simple beings, and that their greatest good is to escape the endless cycle of reincarnation. This answers what is their ultimate reality, the eternal changing world, hence their belief in eternally existing atoms and the state of liberation for humans. This is not only flawed through the Big Bang cosmology video that I talked about, but also the steady state universe models, because they cannot be mathematically worked out, and the fact that the universe is expanding suggests the opposite of a steady state universe. But also, if atoms, or in the simplest sense, just matter, is the ultimate reality, then we run into the problem with Aquinas' first way, that a possible being is made actual by an actual being. All of matter would have to be a potential being for it to change, which Jainism even admits to, that their ultimate reality first is the eternal changing material world. But if matter couldn't change, then we wouldn't see all of this. It wouldn't be able to form anything new. It wouldn't be able to create anything new, become anything new, because it wouldn't be able to change. And thus, there would have to be a first actuality to begin the change in matter in the universe for things to come out of this matter. Because if matter has potentiality to become something, then something of actuality has to cause that matter of potential to become actual. Now let's switch to Buddhism, which believe human beings are neither created nor eternal. They're made up of collections of experiences, which change and transition through time. They also prescribe a reincarnation model, but believe humans are composite, made up of constituents at a time across time. The greatest good is nirvana, which escapes the cycle of reincarnation, and the ultimate reality is a self who has achieved nirvana. Now, this belief is problematic because this may explain how a human being should live, what a human should strive to be and become, but it doesn't explain the why. It also doesn't explain how everything got started. It only explains that one day you could become ultimate reality. It gives some how, but not all the how. It gives no whys. And whenever you have like a sketchy how without any why, that should be scrutinized and contrasted with other options to see if it is still the most plausible explanation for how life is. Now, Hinduism believes that all that exists is the Brahman, which is pure existence itself. So there we go. We were talking in the last video how pure existence needs to be the essence of the ultimate reality. So in Hinduism, it's the Brahman. Humans are eternal because they are Brahman, and Brahman is eternal. Nothing exists independently of Brahman. Hence, this is why they prescribe to the illusion belief that the material world is just an illusion. If everything is Brahman, our five senses only think we see a man or a chair or hear a song, etc. They use the analogy of like, well, if you're in a barn and you think you see a snake in the dark, then you turn on a light and you realize, oh, it's just a rope. Your senses told you that's a snake, but your senses are flawed. It was an illusion. It's actually a rope. And they would say that is literally how we perceive the entire world. They say humans are simple because Brahman is simple. And the greatest good is to be free from ignorance and error, to be one with Brahman. What's the matter with this? Besides the whole fact that if everything is Brahman, then Brahman has to be good and evil, and Brahman itself has no other essence other than pure existence itself. And if everything is just Brahman, that means all good, all bad, all chaos, all order is Brahman, which is a contradiction within itself. And if it's also good and bad, and not pure good or pure bad, that becomes now a composite of two things. As I spoke about in the last video, anything that is a composite being, a compilation of multiple things, it has to be composed by something or someone, and thus cannot be an ultimate being within itself. This goes back to my whole polytheistic thing, that if there cannot be two ultimate realities that are different from each other, if they're the same, then they're really just one ultimate reality. And if they are different, that thus makes them composite beings because they're composed of different things. And if they're composed of different things, they have to be composed by something to become composite. So you cannot have two composite ultimate realities in that sense of polytheism. But the other problem is just logical. Well, if everything is an illusion, so much so that we can't even trust our senses, that we think a rope in the dark is a snake, then we can't trust our own cognitive output, our conclusions, our own thoughts, our philosophical ideas. I mean, thus, it would follow that anything we were to conclude in a world where everything is an illusion is more likely to be false all the time. Anything that we think of would only be true in the reality that is an illusion, not the actual objective truth, meaning that this idea of Brahman is most likely wrong, and it becomes a self-defeating system. And if the idea of Brahman is true, how are we even able to conceive of it in a state where we cannot even perceive reality? So if we cannot perceive reality, we cannot perceive what is reality, which is Brahman, and thus we would not be able to think of this. Finally, we return to Greek polytheism, or mythology. So Lux Tenebris 3 concluded from my video that the atrocities of the Greek gods is an element of their essence, which I did not mean that. If that's something that I alluded towards, or it seemed like I alluded towards that, I did not mean that. Because their atrocities only show that they are able to freely act and also freely commit evils. Their essence then would require that it not include them being ultimately good. And as we discussed in my previous video about morality, where does morality have to come from? It has to come from an ultimate reality, which is ultimately good. So my whole point of bringing up that these gods can commit atrocities, it just means that they cannot be ultimate reality itself. because of the conclusion we came to the morality video, the objectivity video. Another problem with Greek mythology is their idea that everything comes from the god Chaos. We know from the fine-tuning argument, from observations into molecular and cellular biology, which we looked into with Origins of Life and the fossil record, that there is evidence of an intelligent design, and thus an intelligent designer. That order cannot come from chaos, because anything coming from chaos will remain in chaos and will not form into something organized. I talked about this in the second law of thermodynamics, where it states that everything is heading towards a place of increased entropy or increased chaos. You cannot retrograde chaos into order in the natural world. Let's use this analogy. If you have a puzzle and all the pieces are in a big bag, and you take the pieces out of the bag, kind of just like spill them on the floor, the pieces are not going to come together and create the finished product, because you cannot get order from chaos within the natural universe state unless there is an intelligent organizer. If you were to take the pieces out of the bag one by one and to carefully place them on the table, and as you're doing so, fit them together and bring them together into a complete puzzle, then you could take chaos and turn it into order. And you can't say that the Greek god of chaos could do that out of the void, that he was just taking things and ordering them, because his essence is chaos. That's another contradiction. If the god of chaos can put things into order, that means he's going against his essence of chaos, which means that he could not be the god of chaos. We can also see a contradiction in that the god of chaos also claims to consist of the essence of nothingness and also pure existence, which within itself cannot coexist, as both essences, for to exist is something and to not exist is nothing. To be nothing and to be existence is a contradiction and can't work. This also reaffirms that matter itself cannot be ultimate reality, as explained earlier in this video. So now what? First, I want to say I super appreciated the rebuttal. I think this allowed me to make a more cohesive video on the shortcomings of polytheism. If you find any problems, let me know in the comments. But as I said in my previous video, look at any polytheistic religion, compare their origin story or their claim to ultimate reality, and see where they misalign with the conclusions we've made. For example, how Jainism goes against the conclusions made in my Big Bang cosmology video and the Aquinas' First Way. Buddhism dismisses an intelligent designer, which goes against the conclusions made in my scientific evidence series. Hinduism doesn't go against a previous video, but self-defeats itself, essentially. And Greek Polytheism goes against the conclusions made in my video on morality, objectivity, and my scientific evidence series. So if you think you found an error in the video and you comment it, I might just relay you to a previous video if I think I've already addressed it. And if I haven't addressed it, but I plan on addressing it in a future video, then I probably won't make another video of this. I think this video pretty much concludes all of my thoughts on the shortcomings of the polytheistic religions. Anyway, thanks for watching, and please stay tuned for the next video into monotheism.